Good morning. It is so good to be with you all. It was good to praise the Lord together, to pray together, and now to look at his word together. It is a privilege to be part of this community that takes the word seriously. And the word is what we're talking about today. So Psalm 19 is where we will be, and we're going to be working through it a little bit slowly as we go. So as we come to this, I want you to look for some themes in Psalm 19. I want you to pay attention to what is it saying about the word, who's speaking, and how does it all hang together. That's one of the things I want you to be thinking about as we dive into Psalm 19 today. So there are many ways to categorize the Psalms. I think one of the best ways, to understand this psalm is as a wisdom psalm. We're thinking about, it starts with this reflection on creation, and then it gets more specific into the word of the Lord. And so, what does this psalm say about what it means to live the good life? That's another question that I want you to keep in mind as we go. All right, so Psalm 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. So right at the beginning, we have this picture of the heavens declaring the glory of God. This is something that I love to observe in everyday life. I will occasionally schedule sunrise parties with my friends where we get together just to sit and watch the sunrise. Sometimes there's coffee and muffins involved, sometimes not. But it's wonderful to just go and watch the sun, the slow quietness of a sunrise, and look at what God has done here. I have other friends who are more sunset people. They're like, okay, the sunrise is fine, but what's really amazing is all the colors at sunset, and also I'm awake at sunset. So that's the better one to watch. And then you might be like my mom, where the day is fine, but the real excitement comes at night. And when you are looking at those meteor showers, we had one a couple of weeks ago that I went out, same place where I go to watch the sunrise, I went out with my friends to watch that. So all the time, sunrise, sunset, in the middle of the night, we see God's glory in these lights that he's put in the sky. And that, while I feel like that should be where we're going, that seems really amazing, that seems glorious, but that's just the beginning of this psalm. The very beginning is, okay, the heavens declare the glory of God. We're going to get to something even more exciting. Amen. But that's where it starts. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. And then the question is, when do they declare this? How often? They do it day after day, and they do it night after night. So there's no time that they are not declaring the glory of God. It's all the days, all the nights, that's when they're at work proclaiming the glory of God. And how do they do it? Well, they don't have speech. They don't use words. No sound is heard. That's not how their message gets through. It's not with sound. But it's still there. You still have this message that is painted across the sky without words. So when do they do it? It's every day. It's every night. And how do they do it? It's without words somehow, and yet, where do they do it? Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. So all the time and everywhere, the skies are at work declaring the glory of God. They're saying his handiwork is proclaimed even without words. They don't need words to describe who he is and what he has done. There's only so much we can learn from them. We can look at them and say, wow, no way that happened by accident. Look at what God has done. But they don't specifically tell us much more about him. They just tell us that he's glorious. I mean, if that is what he made, then the creator who made that must be even more glorious. That's about as far as we can get. But they are doing this day after day, night after night, everywhere. So that's our general statement. Then we move into a particular example of that, looking at the sun. So here's our example. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It's like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. Or your translation might say, nothing can escape its heat. I'm interested by this illustration of the sun, using that as our particular example of the sun, of the heavens, declaring the glory of God. It starts out by describing God has pitched a tent for the sun. And I think this is where the psalm differs from other ancient Near Eastern hymns about the sun. Because the sun is not on its own, just riding in its chariot across the sky, and it is autonomous. It can't pitch a tent for itself. It's God who pitches the tent for the sun. God sets this up. The sun is doing what God has designed it to do. He pitches the tent, he sets out the course, and then the sun is rejoicing to do what it's made to do. But it is still firmly in the position of creation. And how does it describe what the sun does? We have two illustrations. First, it's like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Second, it's like a champion rejoicing to run his course. So, story about the bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Whoa. Most of the time, Andy's really excited about where this is going. I am thinking about all the weddings I've been in. I've been in a lot of weddings. But, I don't really think a lot about the bridegroom. I think a lot about the bride, partly because I'm always a bridesmaid. But she's the one who comes down the aisle in all the splendor, right, in our weddings. And generally, it's the ones I've been in. They're a single day affair. It's a lot of work leading up to it. Then it happens in 30 minutes, and you have maybe an hour or two of the reception. There it is. That's it. So I don't, in that sense, I can't jump straight to this illustration and really understand what he's saying. But I don't know if you've ever been to a New Orleans wedding or if you have witnessed a New Orleans wedding. But I have, and quite by accident. So I was going down with my friends. We were celebrating my birthday, and we did an escape room. That's one of my favorite things to do. So in between dinner and the escape room, we're just coming out. We're like, okay, we've got our little GPS pulled up. We're going to walk down. It's just down the road, the escape room. We'll get there. And we can't go anywhere because as soon as we come out of the restaurant, there is this parade of people. They're all in full wedding attire. The women have on heels. They've got all their jewels on. The men are all dressed up too. Not what I would wear for walking in New Orleans. They're all doing that. They're walking down. There's a jazz band. The women are waving hankies. It is an ordeal. And this whole procession is going by. I was like, what's happening? What is this? And the person next to me was like, oh yeah, that's a wedding. They do that here. Okay, cool. All right. So we did it, it was like, okay, well, I'll just stand by and rejoice as well, because what are you going to do when that kind of festivity is passing by other than join in it? So we're standing on the sidelines, we're rejoicing. We eventually continue with our plans. But these people are rejoicing to make their parade, their wedding parade, to walk down the streets of New Orleans. And we couldn't escape it. We're not planning to be part of that, but we are witnesses and we see it. I think that's the image that the psalmist is going for here. The sun is rejoicing to run his course, and everyone's going to see that. It doesn't matter what your plans were for the day, you're going to see the sun do his course. Might be covered by a cloud, but you are going to participate in that whether or not you want to. You see that glory as the sun is obedient to what it's made for. The other illustration, like a champion rejoicing to run his course, this is something that I cannot identify with at all. But I think about the Olympics that we just had in Paris, and I am very sure that those runners were rejoicing to run their course. They've trained for it, they are amazing, and they're about to go break world records. I think that is also the illustration of the sun, so excited to do what it can do, to do the thing that only it can do, and doing what God has designed it to do in declaring his glory. So we have those two images, and then we just have kind of a final contemplation on the sun's work. It rises at one end of the heavens, it makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth, or nothing can escape its heat. So we have that first picture, it's all of the heavens, they declare the glory of God, and then we're like, as a particular example, let's look at the sun. It is excited to do what God has made it to do, and it shows God's glory as it goes about doing what it's created for. So that's the first step. We're looking at the word or the message of creation. Then we get into the word of the Creator himself. So let's look at this. This is what I like to call the sixfold goodness of the law of the Lord, because we have 6 statements. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. So when I first read through this, I've read through Psalm 19 multiple times. I'm sure you have as well. I kind of glaze over at this point because it just seems very repetitive. I'm like, I know that this is rejoicing in multiple facets of it, but what is he saying? I'm just like, okay, yes, the law of the Lord is good. Excellent. All right, moving on. But then I was like, okay, I have to dig in and look a little bit more at what's happening here. So we start out with the law of the Lord, and that is followed up. For my own memory's sake, I'm looking at it in pairs. So we have the law of the Lord followed by the statutes of the Lord, or some translations might say here, the testimony of the Lord. So you start out with the law and the testimony, the general witness of the Lord. And how is it described? It is described as perfect. This is this idea of a perfect circle. There's no aberration, just like the sun has made his perfect circuit. Now we're looking at the perfect circle of the law of the Lord. It's perfect. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy. They're sure. They're firm. So we have this picture of there's nothing wrong with it. It's completely circular. It's completely trustworthy. But we're not just, it's not, you could just say that, right? It could just be the law of the Lord is perfect, the statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, the precepts of the Lord are right, etc. But no, we're also looking at how does this impact the human who pays attention to these laws. That's the other part of this series. It says, the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. That's what the law of the Lord does. It is perfect on its own, but it's not there just to be admired. It's there to be taken in, and it refreshes the soul, refreshes the person. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. If you feel like you are the simple person, which hopefully you do, I think if we find ourselves in the situation of being the simple, then we are ready to be made wise by the statutes of the Lord. But they're trustworthy, making wise the simple. Then we get into the precepts and the commands. We're looking at the law and the testimony kind of overall, then we look at the individual parts of it. The precepts of the Lord are right, as in they're straight, they're level, there's nothing wrong with them. That's the idea, another angle of that. The commands of the Lord are radiant or pure or clear. It's like you're looking through a clear glass. They are radiant. And what do? The precepts of the Lord give joy to the heart, and the commands of the Lord give light to the eyes. I think there are a couple of ways we can think about this. This giving joy to the heart and light to the eyes. It's showing you where you need to walk. It's a light, as other psalms say, a light for your path. But I think especially when you pair that light for the eyes with joy to the heart, it's this idea of lightness. No, not just light as opposed to darkness, but light as opposed to heavy. I think you are supposed to think about both of those things. It's giving you joy. It's giving you light to your eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure or clean, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord, or the judgments of the Lord, are firm or true and righteous altogether. So it's this contemplation on what the law of the Lord is. And it's perfect, it's trustworthy, it's right, it's radiant, it's pure, it's firm. But we could just say that, and yet the psalmist is also saying this is what it does for the human. It refreshes the soul. It makes wise the simple. It gives joy to the heart. It gives light to the eyes. It endures forever. It's not a temporary clean that then has to be, that could become common, that then must become clean again. It is clean, lasting forever. And it's altogether righteous. So we've looked at the word of creation, which is declaring the glory of God. We've moved into the word of the Creator, which both declares God's glory in a more specific way, but also works for the benefit of those who keep them. But that's not enough. The psalmist could just stop there, say, okay, we've taken out the law of the Lord like it's a jewel. We've looked at all the facets. All right, now moving on. But he doesn't. He says, now, let me just give you an illustration in case you didn't get what I just said in that sixfold goodness. The decrees of the Lord are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. So, by them, your servant is warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. These are pretty easy, I think, to understand. Pretty clear things. It's an image that made sense when it was originally written. It makes just as much sense now. We get the idea of gold being valuable. And the laws of the Lord are more valuable. More valuable even than pure gold, not even gold-plated copper or something. It's pure gold, more valuable than that. And sweeter than honey. Again, honey from the honeycomb, that is pretty easy to recognize what he's talking about, right? But I had an experience the other week that just helped me understand this even more. I don't know if you've ever had a hot honey pepperoni pizza. Oh, it's so good. I was like, this is just a new level of delight and excitement. The sweet and the hot and the salty all mixed together. This is absolutely amazing. Okay, so that, I think, just a little gift from the Lord. It helped me understand this verse a little bit better. I'm like, okay, if I'm thinking about that honey at that level of delight, that's just a little scrap of the delight that you get from the word of the Lord. So he's talking about something that causes you to rejoice. Much pure gold. Honey from the honeycomb. Hot honey pepperoni pizza, in my case. The word of the Lord is sweeter than that, and it's better than gold. Then he describes what he means by that. It's because keeping the decrees of the Lord, by keeping that, your servant is warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. So this reflection on the word of the Lord is a reflection. It is in awe of the Lord. But it does actually have our interest at heart as well. because in keeping them, there's great reward. In keeping them, your soul is refreshed. In keeping them, you, the simple, are made wise. Your heart, it has joy. Your eyes have light. This is the fear that lasts forever, and it's righteous altogether. So this great reward is being formed into this kind of person that you've been made for. Just like the sun is rejoicing to do what it's created for, then in keeping this, we can rejoice to do what we're created for. So then, after looking at the word of creation and the word of the Creator, we come back to the word of the creature. The servant responds. So he says, who can discern their own errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgression. So there are two problems here. There's the hidden faults, and then there's the willful sins. And the response to both of them is a plea. It's a prayer for God to save him from both of them. For the hidden faults, he asks for forgiveness or cleansing. For the willful sins, he says, don't let them rule over me. Keep me from them. So he needs the cleansing from the one. He needs the deliverance from the other. But the response is this prayer for it. This, especially since we're about to get into the last line of the psalm, says, my rock and my redeemer. It reminds me of Rock of Ages. It says, Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flowed be of sin the double cure. Save from wrath and make me pure. I think that's very similar to what this psalmist is saying. He's asking, yes, give me forgiveness, but also make me pure. Cleanse me from my unknown sins and keep me from the deliberate sins. Only then will I be blameless and innocent of great transgression. And his final plea here is, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Why does he say both the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart? Is he just saying both things because it's nice to have a doubling in poetry? Or is he saying, I need both of these cleansed? I need my words cleansed, and I also need the thoughts of my heart cleansed. Well, you know, you can't spend too much time with me without going to Luke. So we are going to go to Luke now. Luke 6, starting in verse 43, I think goes right along with what the psalmist is saying in Psalm 19. This is in the midst of the Galilee ministry. Jesus is doing his sermon on the plain. So he says, 6:43, no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When a flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete. I think that is what we are to take from that prayer of the psalmist, taking that along with Jesus' words here. there are a couple of things. First, that for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. What are our hearts full of? What are the meditations of our heart? That is going to impact the words of my mouth. And I want the words of my mouth to glorify my Creator, just like the unspoken words of creation glorify the Creator. But then how do you do that? It's by paying attention to the word of the Creator himself. And he says, it's not just listening to it, because if you're just listening to it, it's like building your house on sand. I think of my parents' trailer in Florida that was built on sand, and then when the floods came, it was swept away. That is the picture of just hearing this and not putting it into practice. But if we are truly saying, Lord, and meaning it, letting him be the Lord of our life and following his word like a servant follows his master, that is when we're built on the rock. And we can say, may the meditations of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. I want to take a little bit of time for us to respond in quiet prayer and think about, what is the Lord saying? What are his words? And are you ready to obey them? Steve, thank you for starting our worship as you did. I think this song that we sang, it goes just absolutely perfectly. It's like the Lord was orchestrating it. That second line, a heart resigned, submissive, meek, my great Redeemer's throne, where only Christ is heard to speak, where Jesus reigns alone. Let's let that be our attitude and our intention as we go throughout the rest of the day.